Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Tom Gilbert. I'm a Senior Product Manager at AWS on the Amazon SES team. Today I'm excited to be joined by Sam Kopis, another Senior Product Manager on the SES team. We have Vinay Ugini, a Worldwide Principal Solutions Architect for us. And we have Matt Strzelicki, a Senior Deliverability Manager on the SES team. We are also thrilled to be joined today by Ebenezer Andrin, a Lead Product Manager on the Gmail team at Google. We have assembled this great team for you today to discuss the new requirements that will be in place in 2024 for bulk email senders, and we'll talk through how to prepare for those changes. So just a quick agenda. First, Ebenezer is going to walk us through an overview of the new bulk sender requirements. Then Vinay and Sam are going to discuss how to meet these new requirements using the tools that we have to offer here at Amazon SES. And Matt is going to give us a demo of the Virtual Deliverability Manager within Amazon SES. We'll then conclude with some questions and answers that everyone submitted during their registration. So Ebenezer, with that, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. Let me share my screen and just hope everybody can see my screen.
Looks
And
good.
everybody, can you see my screen?
Yep, I got it.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. So good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for being here. And also thank you, Tom, for having me. As Tom said, my name is Ebenezer Anjorin. I'm a lead product manager here on the Gmail team. And I'm super excited to be here to be talking to you all. All right. So I figured I would just start by giving you all an overview of the new box and the requirements that we announced in October last year, as well as also give you some motivation, driving the changes that we're currently pursuing. So back in October 3rd, 2023, last year we announced a new policy for bulk senders that fall into three broad categories. The first category is around strong authentication and security. The second one is around user controls. And the third really is providing actionable and clear guidance to senders, and I'm going to talk about that more broadly. Right, so going over the requirements in a bit more detail. So for the authentication and security requirements, we are now requiring bulk senders to do a couple of things. One is we're requiring bulk senders to set up both SPF and DKIM. So this is not SPF or DKIM. This is the need to set up both SPF and DKIM. The second is that we want bulk senders to ensure that their from header domain aligns with either the SPF or DKIM domain. One of the common questions and misconceptions that we've gotten from senders is that is the SPF and DKIM domains should be the same, and they don't have to be the same. So your SPF, and DKIM domain don't actually have to be the same, but your from header domain has to align with at least one of them. So as long as your from header aligns with your SPF or DKIM domain, then that's fine. By the way, this is also what's required to pass DMARC alignment, and we're also going to be enforcing on this for senders that are spoofing at gmail.com. The next requirement is around just ensuring that senders are valid DNS record, both forward and reverse DNS records, as well as they're using TLS connection for the emails that they send. And then lastly, we want senders to set up DMARC. We recognize that this is a journey that a lot of senders are just getting started on, and that's why we are requiring at least a policy of none. So if you're a sender and you're worried that you're not ready to have a stricter policy of quarantine or reject, you can at least start with P equals none. And ideally, you would also have the RUA tag so that you can start receiving aggregates, a DMARC report. And these reports are actually super valuable to help you, get the data you need to understand, where you might need to fix some issues. And then for the user controls, we are requiring the senders keep their user reported spam rate below 0.3%. Ideally, most senders should be aiming at even staying below 0.1, but 0.3% is definitely where you start to see some negative impact on your deliverability. And the other requirement around user control is making sure that senders support one-click unsubscribe for marketing or promotional messages. I'm going to talk about this maybe in the Q&A, but just to say right now, this is not required for transactional or legally mandated messages. So, when I say transactional, I mean messages like password resets, account creation, things like order confirmation, or if you're a government and you need to send out, some legally mandated emails, these emails don't require one-click unsubscribe. We only require promotional or marketing messages to a one-click unsubscribe. And again, we will talk about that a bit more when we get to the Q&A. So let's talk about like why are we even making these changes? Because obviously, we know there's a big changes, across the ecosystem, and a lot of senders like yourself are definitely, anxious about the work they need to do to become compliant, as well as the, potential impact in their business. And the reality is, billions of people rely on email for very important communications in every single day. And as you all probably know, it's still difficult to trust that a sender is actually, who they claim to be. Email has been around for many decades now, and it's still pretty easy to send an email pretending to be, you know, um, you know, anyone essentially, if they obviously, like, if the sender doesn't implement some of these requirements that that we are asking for. So simply put, we think that people should be able to trust the sender, of the messages who they claim to be. That's just pretty straightforward, really. And they should also be able to tell the sender that they no longer want to get an email from them. It should be pretty simple. They shouldn't have to jump through orders to do that. And don't we all want a spam-free inbox? I mean, we definitely do, and we're sure that our customers do too. So at the end of the day, we're doing this to make the life of our users easier, but also across the email ecosystem, we want to ensure that people can trust messages that they get. People can have cleaner inbox that then allows them to focus on the messages that they do actually want to get. And this is ultimately good for senders as well. So finally, I'm going to leave you with some tools and resources that I think are going to be useful as you embark on this journey with us. The first two links are helps in the content that I suggest you bookmark. The first one in particular is where we provide answers for all the common questions that we've received from senders like yourself. We update this frequently, and it's really the best source of information, both on the requirements as well as the enforcement timeline. So I urge I really urge you guys to bookmark bookmark this link. I just check it as often as you can, and also treat it as a source of truth, because this is where we primarily provide all the up-to-date information that we get from like the questions that we get from senders, as well as the answers that we want everyone to have access to. So definitely um, bookmark this and check it as often as you can. The second FAQ contains information specifically on how to use data that's currently in our Postmaster tools with regards to understanding your compliance with the sender guidelines. So this is another resource that I think most senders may not be aware of, and I think this is a good one. So there's a lot of good information here that is what we're taking a look at. And then finally, there's a Postmaster tool itself, and hopefully everyone here knows about this tool and they already use it. But for folks that maybe don't yet, so this is a free tool that's designed to help senders understand and diagnose their email performance. So we provide a lot of data here that should help you as a sender. For example, if you want to know what your user reported spam rate is, you definitely want to check that in PMT, because this is the same data that we use for enforcement internally. So definitely sign up for this tool if you don't already use it. And the good news is we have a lot of improvements planned for this year, starting with the compliance status dashboard that should be launching very soon. So this dashboard will make it easy for senders to know if they're compliant or not, or if they need work for specific requirement. So this dashboard is going to be launching very soon. As I said, you'll be able to log into PMT and just see at a glance the requirements that you're doing well and the requirements that you need to fix some issues. So hopefully this will also make it very easy for senders to know if they're compliant or not. And then, finally, before I hand it back to Tom and team, and before we get to the Q&A, I know a lot of senders have a lot of feedback around PMT. This is a tool that's been around for a very long time, and we're really, again, as I said, going to be doing a lot of investment to the tool this year. So please, if you have any feedback, if you have any input that you want to share, regarding Postmaster tools in particular, feel free to send them to me. I definitely appreciate them. And yeah, I mean that's all the content that I have, not to take too much of your time. So thank you, Tom and Tim, for having me here. Thank you to everyone who is joining. I'm gonna hang around for the Q&A and also address some of the questions that you all sent over. And yeah, that's all the content that I have. Thank you again for everyone for your time. Tom.
Awesome. Thanks, Ebenezer.
Back to you.
Really appreciate it. Okay, I'll take over the share. And with that, I will hand it over to Sam and Vinay.
Let's see if my camera works. All right, well, thank you, Tom. So I'm going to talk you through a couple of aspects of the new requirements, just to introduce some of these concepts to you and to help you understand some of the things we're talking about in a little bit more detail. And then we'll get into a discussion about some tooling that SES provides that'll help you comply with the new requirements. So there's three major technologies you need to be aware of. You may have heard these words floating around. We'll talk about these in a little bit of detail now so you know what they are. And these are SPF, DKIM, and DMARC whenever it comes to asserting that you have the right to send bulk emails on behalf of a specific domain. These are key technologies, and as Ebenezer mentioned, these are used by mailbox providers to ensure that the mails that are delivered to their customers are actually authorized to be sent on the domain's behalf, and that benefits everyone. Email is a key asset when it comes to customer outreach, so these technologies help maintain high confidence amongst mail consumers so that they can have confidence that the mails they're getting are coming from the places that are asserted in the email. So let's start off with SPF, or the Sender Policy Framework. This is a technology that enables a domain owner to assert which IP addresses can be used to send mail on the domain's behalf. And you can think of this as email transits through the internet. When it arrives at a mailbox provider, this basically gives a domain owner a way to specify what channels can actually contain the emails that are sent to mailbox providers on that domain's behalf. The domain owners will add information to their DNS information that allows mailbox providers to look this up and confirm whether or not a channel that is sending email is actually valid for that domain. Another you'll hear a lot about is domain keys identified mail, or DKIM. This is used to actually sign messages so that mailbox providers can confirm that the contents of the message are actually authorized by the domain owner as well. And what this will do is use public key infrastructure to sign and distribute the email. And when the mailbox provider accesses the email, it can get the corresponding key from a DNS record published by the domain provider and confirm that the content was in fact signed by someone who is authorized by the domain owner. So these two technologies go hand in hand. With a combination of SPF and DKIM configurations set up, you can give mailbox providers a very clear signal that when you send emails on behalf of the domain, that you do in fact have the right to do so. And this increases the likelihood that the mailbox provider will trust the emails you send and deliver them to their customers. Now there's a third technology, which is DMARC, domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. And you can think of this kind of like control instructions. You have DKIM, you have SPF, and DMARC basically tells mailbox providers what to do in the case where there's a violation. As you heard, it's now required for some mailbox providers that sending domains have a DMARC policy, even if no action is specified. So you'll need to make sure that you do have a DMARC policy. It could have an action of none. Other things that DMARC can do, it can instruct mailbox providers that if there's a problem to quarantine the messages or to just flat out reject them and refuse to accept them from the sending party. Now, when you think of all three of these together, what we generally recommend is that you do your best to make sure that all of these are in place and set up and validated end to end. In fact, it is required to have one of DKIM or SPF. You don't have to have both, but we do recommend that you have both set up and configured for the best delivery experience. Okay, and with that, I will hand it off to Vinay.
Thank you, Sam. I hope everyone is having a great day so far, wherever you are. Thanks for joining. I'm Vinay Ujini, Worldwide Principal Solutions Architect specializing in Amazon SES and Pinpoint. Now let's explore what occurs when the DMARC policy needs to be implemented. We went over examples, definitions, and rules. Let's see how it actually works in the background. So when an email arrives at the recipient's email server, as previously discussed, the email will be delivered to the inbox if it passes either the SPF or DKIM checks. However, if it fails either of the both verifications, the specific DMARC policy set for your domain comes into play as determined by the receiving email provider. The policy might be set to none, and we'll go over the policies and everything in the next couple of slides, but the policy might be set to none, indicating the message should be delivered regardless. Alternatively, you could set it to quarantine, prompting the receiving server to divert the email to a spam or a separate quarantine folder, or reject, which means the server will outright refuse the email, preventing it from reaching the intended recipient to reduce your spam count. Subsequently, a comprehensive report can be requested back to the sender's email server for detailed examination. Next, please. So here's the table, which will see how various configurations for DKIM and SPF domain alignment go from ranging from non-adherence to improved setups top to bottom. So with the new changes in place, transitioning from email verified identities to domain verification is recommended. That's one of the key things. And ideally, one should also configure a custom mail from domain if you're not using your domain that matches your own domain. For example, when an email does not imply custom mail from within SES, Amazon SES defaults to using the domain email.amazonses.com for the mail from address. While your emails may still meet DMARC standards via DKIM, there won't be a domain alignment for SPF. So we advocate that all major senders align their from domain with the mail from by setting up a subdomain of their sending domain, complete with dedicated MX and SPF records. In such scenario, the subdomain bounds.example.com, as you can see here, could be dedicated to handling bounds and complaint notifications rather than serving as a mailbox for actual users. So if you actually want to send it, you can use transactional.example.com or marketing.example.com or something like that. Next, please. So to wrap up our DMARC guidelines, we recommend initiating your DMARC journey by setting your DNS DMARC policies to none if you haven't established one yet. We spoke about that a couple of slides ago about setting these DMARC policies. And here are three high-level examples that we put in, right? So in this example, you can see V equals DMARC1, that declares the version of the DMARC being used. The P equals quarantine policy. The second one, that's the example we're doing here, instructs receiving servers to quarantine messages that fail DMARC checks, that is, move them to the spam folder. And the PCT equals 50 tag indicates that the quarantine policy should be applied to only 50% of the email messages that fail DMARC authentication checks. This is allowing for a phased approach to policy enforcement. The reason this is important is if you put everything 100%, sometimes you probably have missed the SPF check and all of your, or most of your emails are ending in spam. So I would suggest for relatively new senders, starting at 25, gradually increasing it to 50, and eventually when you get to 100%, which means you're not running into that problem anymore. And then finally, you have RUA, which is here mail to DMARC reports at example.com. That specifies the email address where aggregate reports for DMARC policies should be sent. This enables the sender to analyze and improve your email authentication practices. Next, please. Finally, as we look towards enhancing our email communication practices, the product team at AWS SES is prioritizing implementing one-click unsubscribe feature ahead of June 2024. On the number 5 here, you can see there is a blog that is out there that you can follow step by step on how to implement this currently in your APIs. This will ensure that your subscribers can easily opt out of your mailings without any hassle directly from email headers. Basically, if you see the email, there will be an unsubscribe button at the header, and they should be able to easily get out of your email mailing list to make it a pleasurable experience for your subscribers. Easy handling of that. In line with best practices, you should process all unsubscribe requests within a 48-hour window. This prompt action reflects the respect for subscribers' choices that they don't want the mailing anymore, and your compliance with email regulations. Additionally, it's highly recommended to revisit your email list building methodologies. Objective here is to maintain the integrity of mailing lists, ensuring they're composed of engaged and billing participants, not dormant, thereby avoiding any interaction with spam traps, which may harm your sending reputation because people are not opening your emails and they're just sitting there forever. And next, please. Thank you.
Okay, pop back on here. So really, what is the key takeaway? What is our recommendation to you? Really comes down to a couple of things. Number one, you need to make sure that all your right to send configurations are set up and correct. And most importantly, probably beyond that, is to make sure that your complaint rates are below 0.3%. There's multiple ways you can do that. Mailbox providers often offer tools like Google Postmaster Tools or Yahoo Sender Hub, where you can monitor your complaint rates. You also need to take a look at those at the domain level, not just overall across all your sending. Make sure you keep it under 0.3% and probably significantly lower if you want to play it safe. And when you're sending through SES, you can segregate your traffic using configuration sets, and you can monitor the deliverability metrics independently through the entire funnel, including your complaint rates. That will help you to segregate traffic. If you have some marketing traffic, some transactional traffic, that will help you be able to look at those metrics independently and be able to determine where problems occur, if any. And finally, we have in SES a whole tool chest for you to monitor and troubleshoot reputation. That's Virtual Deliverability Manager, or VDM. We'll dive into that in a minute to talk about how you can use it to understand where you're at, monitor and troubleshoot issues. This includes recommendations about things that you can do to improve it, and also some monitoring for your configuration to make sure that that everything is set up correctly. We also have a blog out there that you can read to understand how to use VDM to increase your deliverability rates overall, even if you're well under the threshold. So diving in a bit more to VDM, we'll do a demo here shortly. And just to give you an overview, there's two major components you're going to see in VDM. You're going to see our dashboard and you're going to see the advisor. These surface two different categories of capabilities. The dashboard gives you quite a breadth and depth of analytics for exploring your deliverability metrics from send all the way to user engagement, like opens and clicks. You can slice all your metrics, complete rates, everything by sender, by mailbox provider, even by configuration set if you're using that for traffic segmentation. And fairly recently, we've also added the ability to dive in and look at individual messages and see the exact SMTP responses that are coming back from mailbox providers. Very, very helpful if you identify any problematic trends to go in there and spot check, see some things that may have bounced, and understand what is actually driving that. Greatly accelerates the process of finding root causes and ideating ways to improve your deliverability. On the other side, we have Advisor. Advisor is a system that sits and just monitors your configuration and your sending patterns and provides recommendations about how you can change things to improve your sending overall. And most importantly, that includes checking all your configurations, your SPF, your DKIM, or your DKIM domains aligned. That's critical. Check to see if your DMARC policy is in place. And this is something we're continuing to add checks to. We'll be checking the domain alignment on your behalf. Obviously, we'll also be shortly shipping a new advisor check that monitors your complaint rates on an ongoing basis. And you can pipe recommendations from advisor through EventBridge to get push notifications, so you do not have to actively monitor this yourself in the console. You can get notifications when you have any problematic scenarios arise for a very fast turnaround. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, who will walk you through some scenarios about how to use this and debug any challenges you might find.
Okay. So right now we're in the Amazon SCS console. One of the first things you'll notice right now when you log into the console, we do have a quick note here about the new Gmail and Yahoo changes. We've written a blog about it. I would encourage everybody to go ahead and take a quick look at the blog to see a lot of this outlined as well within that blog. But you see your normal reputation stats, normal bounce complaint metrics. But in addition to that, we have the newer feature of Virtual Deliverability Manager. So I'll look at them in components here. The advisor piece, which Sam had mentioned, does look at your infrastructure. It looks at your DNS to make sure that the verified identities that you have in your account are all configured correctly with your SPF record, DKIM record, DMARC, even BIMI. So you can see that there's a couple identities within this account that, for instance, this one, receipts demo, is missing DKIM. Pretty important, especially in the context of what we're discussing today. This notification is saying that, and recommendation is saying that there's not an aligned mail from, so there's not a custom mail from, indicating also that potentially the SPF is not signing specifically for this domain. So these are all very good areas to come in, take a look, make sure, especially if you're managing a lot of different sending domains, just to make sure that they're all aligned with proper infrastructure. I'm going to go into the dashboard now, and this is where you can look at things and see things in more of a trending basis, more holistic views, and then being able to kind of dive and drill into data sets here. So you see the general overview and your sending volume over a specific amount of time. For this instance, we're just going to use 7 days. And keep in mind, this is a demo account, so a lot of this data is test data. But what you would use the graphs for is to look at possible trends. So if you were to say this was maybe 30 days or 14 days rather than 7 days, you might want to look at things like, are our bounces going up? When we did have a higher bounce rate, was it the result of a higher complaint rate the previous day? Did we spike in volume any one day? You know, those are just signals that you can look at and then try to better identify the problem, because it's much easier to try to identify a problem with a very specific portion of your mail than it is for your entire account. But we do start with the account overview. You can see here, generally, this is all pretty good. You might want to see a higher general delivery rate. And you can look and you can start breaking down this data. So we can break it down by mailbox provider in the ISP section. If you have multiple sending identities, you might have one that's more problematic than another. And then same with configuration sets, and then we can drill down to the message level. So let's say in this account, we're looking at a 90% delivered rate. That's pretty good, but we want to see maybe, do we have a delivery rate with a specific identity that we have a problem with? So we can see here we have a few identities in here, 2 of them that are active. One of them's delivering at 96.8. That's pretty good. You do want to be around 99 generally, but there is a deviation for some level of bounces. But 41% is quite low. So what you'd want to do is then go look further into this specific identity to try to figure out what's going on. You can do the same thing. It trends you specific for this identity, same kind of dashboard. And then really you want to come down here and look at, are you having a problem with a specific mailbox provider? Are you having a complaint issue with one of them? But here, just for the purpose of this demo, you can see this particular sending domain has a problem with sending to AOL, Yahoo, Earthlink, and unknown ISP is kind of a catch-all bucket of domains that aren't classified or tied necessarily to one of the larger mailbox providers. But we can go in and take a look. And we might want to go in and look to see, what's going on with our Yahoo AOL, and we want to just look at our from address. And we might also want to put ISP equals, we'll just do AOL for simplicity. So we're looking over the past few days. It looks like it's one specific address. When you click the view details within the recipient, you can see things like subject line, what mailbox provider it was. If you want to pull the message ID and go to the content, it has the message ID there. What's really the more important parts are the timestamp, when it was when the event actually happened, and then what actually happened with the message. So this particular recipient, the reason why they're getting bounced is because they're actually on the suppression list for previously bouncing. So instead of just continuing to send to a invalid recipient, because this landed on the suppression list, this is being suppressed, so it's not furthering of the negative reputation potentially being built up by sending to invalid recipients. So if we were to remove this one, a lot of those AOL bounces would go away. I think we also had an issue with Earthlink. So if we were to go and search for the Earthlink one, okay, we'll look to see what the SMTP response says for this. It actually gives us a 550 recipient rejected. And this is the importance of looking at your SMTP responses. This one is actually telling you a good bit of information. It's one telling you that they work with a hosting provider, Vade Secure, and that the SMTP responses may come from that provider. So it's giving us a site to go to. It's telling us the 403 code, and in this situation, it's actually telling us that the message couldn't be sent because it was sent to a non-existent customer. So effectively, we should be treating this as a invalid recipient bounce, not necessarily just a general transient bounce. So it's generally a good idea to look at the SMTP response, especially when you have bounces, because there could be an indicator in there why you're bouncing or what you can do about it as a follow-up. So another good use case for this would be, say somebody calls in and says, hey, so-and-so never received their message. They're emailing our support team. Can you find that message? Was it delivered? And so maybe I'll just pull an address that was part of this test list. You can see it came up here. So you can mention that the address was delivered, to, when it was delivered. So the guidance here might not necessarily be that the message wasn't delivered. It might be that it was routed to a tab or potentially to the spam folder, and that might be the indication of where to look for the message. Yeah, but you also then you can use this for not just looking up negatives or bounces or high complaints. You can also use it for managing and looking at higher open rates. When you have higher open rates, you can typically engage with that audience at a more frequent level. Maybe get a little bit more aggressive with your emails, with your marketing program. So it's a good area to look at for both kind of negative trends and both positive trends. And that is a bit of how you can use Virtual Deliverability Manager to troubleshoot issues across your sending account. Pass it back over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Matt. We'll now move into some Q&A, and I see the questions are coming in Slido. I'm going to release those for our panelists to answer as well. All right, so thanks everyone for submitting your questions during the registration. We have a few of those queued up here, and yeah, do please feel free to continue submitting your questions in the Q&A section, and our panelists will get to those as well. So let's see, the first question that we have, first few here are for Ebenezer. So first, does Gmail apply any rules internally to decide whether or not the list unsubscribe header is honored? If so, how would you recommend that senders test that they're compliant ahead of the June 2024 deadline?
Awesome. So hopefully I understand the actual intent behind this question. I think I really focused on the testing aspect of it. But essentially, if you've implemented one-click unsubscribe and you want to test it, the easiest way to do is just send a test email to the Gmail account that you own. And if everything is set up correctly, you should see the unsubscribe button, in the screenshot to the right. And you can click that, and that should initiate the request to you. And that way you'll be able to actually test that one, the request is being sent from Gmail to your system. And ultimately, the logic to unsubscribe the user is controlled by you because you implement that. So ultimately, that's how you will be able to test it, that your logic is working correctly and and the user is being removed from your mailing list. Gmail doesn't actually control that. We ultimately just make a request to the URL that's provided in the header of the mail. So hopefully that answered the question that was asked.
Awesome, thanks Ebenezer. Next one is, does the 5,000 per day include emails to all Google supported endpoints?
Another good question. The short answer is no. So for now, only emails that are sent to personal Gmail accounts count towards the 5,000 limit. So mails that are sent to workspace customers are not included. They are excluded from the requirement as well as the enforcements as well. However, this is also in the FAQ. Even if you are a workspace customer sending emails to personal Gmail accounts, then the requirements apply. So that's something to clarify. If you're a workspace customer or you use workspace, if you send an email to a personal Gmail account, the requirements apply. But any email sent to business accounts that are workspace customers are excluded.
Okay, great. Next one. How will Gmail inspect emails to verify that they have the one-click unsubscribe option?
Yeah, so this is a question that we get a lot. The short answer is Gmail isn't inspecting emails to decide is this transactional or is this promotional. And that's for several reasons. One is we believe that senders know their mail and their business more than we do. So ultimately, senders decide, because they know their email, they know which one is transactional and which one is promotional. And then also different countries actually have different laws that sort of stipulate what is promotional versus what is not promotional. I think the guidance that we give essentially is if you make it easy for users to unsubscribe from your marketing emails, then they are less likely to report you as spam. So the way to think about it is not so much, is Gmail going to determine what's transactional or promotional? It really should be, if I'm sending mails that users are likely to mark as spam, and our data suggests that users tend to mark promotional and marketing emails as spam versus mails like password reset. If you don't implement one-click unsubscribe, then they're less like, then they're more likely to report those similar spam, which then increases your user reported spam rates and ultimately impact your deliverability. So Gmail isn't looking at mails to decide what's transactional or promotional, but we know that users tend to report at a higher rate on marketing emails if they don't have the option to unsubscribe. And also, as long as you implement the one-click unsubscribe correctly in your mail headers, then the treatment is going to show up in the UI. And this is not just specific to Gmail, that's just what the specification calls for. So all clients that support the unsubscribe, if you implement correctly, they'll be able to have that treatment in the UI that makes it easy for users to unsubscribe.
Okay, got it. And how will Gmail distinguish between commercial versus service or transactional emails? We have concerns from customers that send bulk service reminders to customers, but they don't include unsubscribe links in those types of emails.
Yes, I think this is sort of very similar to the previous question. So a couple of things here is, I think I already talked about that, Gmail is not, or Google is not making determination. That's one. Two is we're not requiring that senders include unsubscribe for transactional emails as well as legally mandated emails. So this is only required for marketing or promotional emails. And as I just said previously, the reason why we're doing this is ultimately we want senders to reduce their user reported spam rates. And what we've seen is that if you don't give users an easy way to unsubscribe from your marketing or promotional emails, they're more likely to report those mails as spam. And when they do, that's going to impact your reputation and your deliverability as well.
Okay, thanks. And yes, we got this question from a customer that wants to know if the results from Google Postmaster Tools are 100% accurate, and how much we should really rely on those, and basically if there are any other platforms we should be using.
Yeah, so this is a great question. Senders definitely should rely on the data in PMT, Google Postmaster Tools, to monitor the spam rate. And the reason for this is because for enforcement purposes, this is the same data that we use. So essentially, you can use third-party services for other insights that they provide. That's fine, but ultimately the reliable data, especially for things like user-reported spam rates, is going to be the data that is first-party, that is in the Postmaster Tools, because that's the same data that we're going to use for enforcement purposes. So I would definitely encourage people to rely on the data that is in Gmail Postmaster Tools. And also, as I talked about earlier, we actually have an extensive plan this year to make a lot of improvements, to the tool to make it both easier to use as well as make the data, a lot easier to understand.
Cool. We're excited to hear that, and thrilled to plug SCS into all those enhancements. Next, Postmaster Tools only report spam rates for specific days and not as an average over time. So I guess with these new rules, does one day have to stay below 0.3% and never exceed, or 0.1% and never exceed 0.3%? How should we think about that?
Yeah, another great question. So maybe actually one thing to clarify is, so yes, Postmaster reports spam rates on a daily basis, and it's really on the date that the mail was sent. So not if you're seeing a spam rate for a given day, it's a spam rate for the day that the mail was sent, not just for the day that you're looking at. So that's one thing. I think the real crux of this question is the enforcement for, the new enforcement for the spam rate requirements is that senders that are above the 0.3% will be ineligible to, for the mitigation that will provide. And this is essentially when you need some form of support. And to be eligible for those support, senders would have to keep the spam rate below 0.3% for 7 consecutive days. So essentially, if you have a dip for one day, and then your spam rates goes up, like that'll be fine as long as you keep the spam rates below the 0.3% for 7 consecutive days. Then you'll be eligible to get mitigation.
Okay, that helps. And then last one for Ebenezer here. The public sector has some laws that require authorities to inform their citizens. And the most cost-effective way to do that is often email. So, and in some of these, the unsubscribe link isn't an option. So what would you recommend for public sector folks like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is a question that we've addressed in the FAQ, and we get these questions a lot. And it's not just public sector, even think of like banks, for example. So again, it's the same answer, right? If you're sending transactional messages or messages that you have to send legally, then you do not require one-click unsubscribe. Again, you should only implement one-click unsubscribe for your marketing promotional emails. And again, as I said, pretty much every sender who sends a marketing or promotional email knows this is a marketing email, which is also why, we are not trying to classify what's promotional or not, because we believe that senders know what's transactional or what's marketing. And if they don't know, well, users definitely do know. When users see a marketing email, they clearly know that it's a marketing email. And if you don't make it easy for them to unsubscribe, like I said, you're more likely to report your spam, or even they might even block you permanently, because if they report your spam and you still keep sending to them, they might block you. So ultimately, I think a good way for senders, for everyone to really think about this is not so much about, do we want you to stay one-click unsubscribe everywhere? It's really about how do you protect your own deliverability by making sure that you give users the option to unsubscribe rather than reporting your email as spam. Because like we also know that there are cases where users, genuinely give you the email for you to start sending them marketing messages, and then maybe they don't want that message anymore. And if you don't make it easy for them to opt out of that, then they will report to you as spam. So by making it easy for users to unsubscribe, they're more likely to report to you as spam, which again is going to have a negative impact on your future deliverability. So to answer this question again, for transactional and legally mandated emails, you're not required to implement one-click unsubscribe.
Awesome, thanks. And one more I just want to mention really quick from the live Q&A was about the timeline. I know it's mentioned in the Google FAQ that was posted about when this will all be rolled out. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, but just wanted to clarify really quick. The question was about today, is any percentage of the email being blocked currently, and will that when is that current rollout planned?
Great question. So we are currently not rejecting or permanently blocking any messages that are non-compliant today. So that's not happening. That's one. The second thing I would say is what we're currently doing as far as enforcement goes is a very small percentage of non-compliant traffic are going to start to receive temp fields. And the reason for the temp fields is they let the sender know, and actually I think the demo actually just showed you how you can see that in your tool, which is fantastic. So so this temp fields have specific error codes that let you know which requirements you're non-compliant for. And typically most email systems will automatically retry the temp fields, and when they retry, they're very likely to be delivered. So that's the phase that we're in now. The overarching approach that we're taking is, because we understand how critical this is for senders and your businesses, so this is going to be a gradual and progressive rollout. So right now we're starting with a very small portion of non-compliant traffic, and that's going to gradually increase over the coming months until we eventually get to more stricter enforcement. But to be clear, we are not rejecting any non-compliant email as at today. That hasn't started yet.
Awesome. Cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Ebenezer. Let's see. The next question is for Sam from our team. How do we know if our bulk email sending implementation is sufficient?
Okay. So again, this comes back to the best practices ideas that we just kind of went through. Make sure you look through all your configurations, that you have DKIM or SPF set up for every sender that you use, that your DMARC policy is in place, that your complaint rates are consistently below 0.3%. We would recommend being substantially below that. And also make sure that your unsubscribe headers are set for the appropriate types of email. That is kind of your overall just general big bucket items. There's a lot of things you can do to continue to fine tune things. You can look at your message content, make sure your recipient lists are clean. One good way to get started with this is to use VDM to do a quick check of your sending configuration. Just run let the advisor system run, and it will emit recommendations about things you can look at. You obviously need to confirm everything yourself, but that's a great place to start. If you're just saying, hey, how do I get started? I need a real quick checklist of things to dig into. That's a good way to get started.
Cool, thanks, Sam. Next one is for you as well. In SES, is it necessary to configure a custom mail from domain if I'm using email.amazonses.com as SPF, my DKIM is set up, and there's a DMARC record for the domain?
It is not necessary, but we do recommend it. Most specifically, you need to make sure that your DKIM is domain aligned. If it is not, that will be a problem. DKIM will not pass in that case. If you have both SPF set up correctly, DKIM set up, you have a custom mail from, that is an ideal situation, and you're going to get higher confidence on the receiving end of emails you send if you have all of this configured correctly. But strictly to answer the question, no, it is not required to do both. You do one or the other typically. And we would recommend leading with DKIM, domain aligned DKIM specifically, but we do recommend that you do everything to maintain the highest reputation possible.
Cool. Let's see, next one is for you as well. We send our email using send bulk template email. How can we add the headers for list unsubscribed post and list unsubscribed to meet these guidelines?
Yeah. Today in SCS, if you want to add custom headers, you must use a send raw variant. We are aware of this, and we are working on a fix for the V2 APIs, and that will be send email in the V2 and send bulk email. What that will allow you to do is you will be able to just specify custom headers like the list unsubscribe headers as additional arguments. When you're sending your mail, make it very easy to add these capabilities. If you're using the V1 APIs and you want to take advantage of this new capability, we recommend that you look at migrating to the V2 APIs. The good news is that's a very simple lift. We're putting together a blog post to guide you through that. And the versions of the library can actually live side by side if you want to, if you have other things you're doing with the V1 APIs. But that is our plan. We are hoping to have that ready in early March, so you can see an update coming to V2 APIs for simple specification of custom headers, including these.
Okay. Next one is for Vinay. This customer has SCS verified identities for customers using their CRM. Most of them don't have the knowledge to set up domain verification through their DNS or use another email provider. What would be the best way for them to manage identities in those cases?
Thanks, Tom. So the way you do that is to implement managed subdomains. For example, here you do cxname.crm.com. That will be a subdomain under the crm.com domain to streamline the process. This method is detailed in this blog that has been authored by one of our colleagues. I just posted it in the chat. Please review that. By adopting managed subdomains, you effectively handle the domain verification for your clients in a B2B2C scenario, enabling them to use SES for their email communications with minimal technical hassle. This approach ensures seamless integration of SES verified domains into your CRM that could provide a user-friendly experience to your customers.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, next one is for Sam again. Because we have many senders using that root domain, we need to be able to identify spam complaints for all accounts so that we can flag and weed them out. How can we get to that data?
So if this is a situation where you have multiple identities that you would like to track independently, the best way to do this is to set up independent sending identities for each one of the scopes that you want to track independently. That will allow you to see metrics aggregated independently for each, and it will be a little bit easier for you to go in and do troubleshooting. So this is something where especially we see people sometimes using a single parent domain that they have set up as a sender, and there's actually subdomains under that they could be potentially configuring as separate sending identities. We would recommend you do that and align that with work streams, lines of business, customers of your own as appropriate. And then you can look at all of these independently.
Thanks, Sam. Do these requirements apply equally to transactional and promotional emails? I think this one is for Vinay.
Hey, yeah, Ebenezer spoke about this earlier. Bulk senders must comply with the requirements set for bulk emailing. Now, when it comes to individual transactional emails, I think he mentioned it earlier, they could be exempt from the obligation to include the easy unsubscribe option. But provided that these messages maintain really low spam rates and not used for marketing purposes. The distinction applies regardless of the classification, if they're a bulk sender or not.
Okay, great. And then another one for you, Vinay. How can we reduce our user-reported spam rate?
Yeah, good one. So regarding, so first, you do that by setting up all the email policies that we talked about and the use of DMARC policies for bulk email senders. And then you could choose between none or reject policy based on your confidence in your email authentication practices and the potential impact on deliverability. I'll just reiterate, like setting up a none policy can be useful for monitoring and adjusting your email practices without affecting your deliverability. But if you set a reject policy, it offers stronger protection against phishing and spoofing by preventing unauthorized emails being sent on your behalf without your knowledge. So depending on the type of business you are, depending on the type of email you send, you set up these and then monitor and then change. And as always, please reach out to our SES specialist teams if you're struggling with it, and we can look at it case by case and help you out.
Okay, let's see, last one for you, Vinay, and then we'll wrap up here. How do we manage reputations of our SMTP servers?
Yeah, so managing the reputation of SMTP servers primarily involves concentrating on domain's reputation rather than just IP address. It's a combination of both, but primarily it's the domain's reputation, which falls outside the scope of this guidelines. But it's crucial to prioritize maintaining everybody's sender's domain reputation by minimizing dispatch of unsolicited emails, making sure there's opt-in, making sure there is unsubscribes, easy unsubscribes setup. I have a blog one of colleagues wrote. I'm putting it in the chat. Please take this. This gives a detail on how to use how your sending reputation can be affected with SES dedicated IPs and shared IPs and all that fun stuff. I think a lot of the questions, and this is a very generic question, I answered on the periphery, but this link helps a lot more detail.
Okay, thanks, Vinay. Unfortunately, that wraps up all the time that we have. We'll try to post final answers to the questions in the chat, but just at a high level. So thanks again to all of our speakers and to everyone for joining today. Really, the key things to take away from this are, number one, being mindful of the domain authentication requirements and making sure that all your mail is authenticated. Number 2 is keeping spam complaint rates under that 0.3% threshold. And a great way to do that is by giving recipients an easy way to unsubscribe, especially using that one-click unsubscribe header. You can read an overview of this on our blog post, which is posted here in this QR code. And then lastly, we would really love for everyone to share their feedback on this session. We really value that feedback, and if there's anything that requires follow-up afterward, we can make sure to get to it based on your responses in that survey. And lastly, I want to say we will look to get this deck shared out with everyone that registered, as well as a recording if we're able to do so. So again, really appreciate everyone joining today. Hope this was helpful, and happy sending.